Canada has expelled India's High Commissioner and 5 other Indian diplomats, and the RCMP says it has evidence linking them to criminal activity, including homicides. India has responded by kicking out 6 members of Canada's diplomatic mission there. Here is BC Premier David Eby reacting to the news.
I'm profoundly concerned about the safety of the Sikh community. I know there are many people on hearing this news who are concerned about their own safety. There are others who are wondering, how is this possible that the government of India could potentially be involved in this kind of violent activity in Canada? What I can assure the Sikh community, what I can assure everybody in British Columbia and in Canada is that as far as the RCMP are involved, we will make sure that they have all of the resources necessary to protect different communities in our province from foreign interference, and also to make sure that they hold those involved in Canada accountable for any action threatening a British Columbian, an Ontarian, an Albertan, or a Canadian.
Ujjal Dosanjh is a former Premier of British Columbia, and he joins me now. Mr. Dosanjh, it's good to see you. Thanks for joining the show today.
Good to be with you.
It's been an hour-by-hour series of developments. What's your reaction of where we are right now?
Well, it's extraordinary that you have so much evidence being presented by the RCMP of extortion of builders and contractors and then threats to people's lives. And that's really not acceptable as a Canadian. And I believe that, when the prosecution proceeds, things might come to light that might still shock us. And I'm pleased that the RCMP have been able to do what they've been able to do. The diplomatic tit for tat really doesn't concern ordinary Canadians or ordinary Indians. I mean, nations do that to each other. We still have a relationship. It's an important relationship between the two countries, but obviously it is at its lowest ebb. I've never seen it like this, even after the nuclear tests that Canada really didn't like when India, exploded a nuclear bomb sometime in the 90s, and the relations became cooler. But I've never seen it like this. But, not to say that what India is doing is acceptable, but for the violence, which is violence opposite to the Khalistani extremism and violence that's been in Canada, I'm not surprised. People get tired. Because what happens is that you have had from Air India and from before Air India, and to date, Khalistani extremists have been able to function with hate speech, violent hate speeches within the temples, outside the temples, without any action from the government of India.
With the government of India or the government of Canada, sir? You say government of India.
The government of Canada.
Right.
Yeah, government of Canada. And the Prime Minister has, from the day he took power, from the day he ran for leadership, he's been surrounded by the Khalistanis. They've been in his cabinet. They've been in his inner circle. He now has an alliance with Mr. Jagmeet Singh, who is a Khalistani himself. I'm not suggesting he's violent, but many Khalistanis have perpetrated violence on the community for a long time, including Air India. Not much has been done. Canada has failed.
Right.
I'm not suggesting India is right to do what it's doing, but we need to examine our own actions in defending ordinary Canadians that are under threat from the Khalistani extremism, as we are doing to those that are under threat from Indian violence by the government of India.
But if people are committing hate speech and there's a complaint about it, it should be investigated and people should be charged. But we're talking about speech being met with bullets, right? In these sorts of circumstances, there's no evidence.
Absolutely.
Right? So, I mean, the government of Canada, I appreciate this has been a long-held view by some members of your community that they have been way too soft on this and that they've allowed it to fester. But I wonder, though, what do you make of...
That's the truth. I mean, that is the truth. That's incontestable truth. You tell me how it's wrong.
I'm not arguing with you. I was just summarizing. I'm curious, like, what you make of the actions today, the expulsion of the diplomats, whether you think this government had any choice other than to do that, sir.
Oh, look, as Canadians, we had no choice. And India retaliated as India would do. They have their compulsions and we have our own. We have to defend our people. All I'm saying is the government of Canada, the RCMP, the institutions in Canada have been very selective in defending people. They have not defended people that have been threatened violently and otherwise by Khalistanis in this country for a long, long time. And that's not to justify what government of India is alleged to be doing. It's absolutely wrong. But you know, the thing is, we have a double standard in this world. America can go blow off anybody in any place of the world, it's justified. India does that, it's not justified. Neither is justified from my point of view. But the fact is, you know, might is right. Am I right or not?
Well, I mean,
ultimately, you know, I'm not suggesting Canada has done anything wrong to India,
right?
But Canada has certainly not stood by its own people when they've been, whose safety has been violated or threatened by the Khalistanis in this country.
So,
and that's something nobody's looked at. Nobody cares about.
So what more should Canada be doing there? Just because we're getting tight on time. What more is it you wanted to see Canada do? I mean, I was a young man when Air India happened. But what would you like to see
Canada
since?
Canada needs to stand up and say to the Khalistanis, please stop engaging in hate and violent speech within the temples. Stop threatening other people, and perhaps stop trying to dismember a friendly country, which was quite friendly until about 2 or 3 years ago. So I think ultimately we as Canadians need to take some responsibility about the situation where it's at. Nothing justifies government of India's actions, alleged or otherwise. But, you know, I'm not suggesting the government of India is right just because they're angry now at the situation they're doing this. Absolutely wrong, improper.
So
I'll be the first one to condemn that. I've always done that.
So help me understand. I was going to say, help me understand, Mr. Dosanjh, what is it Canada isn't doing that the United Kingdom, the United States, Australia are doing? Because we've seen similar incidents of transnational repression in those countries, including a murder for hire plot in the United States last year as well. What is it those countries are doing that Canada isn't doing?
You have, in Australia or in the United States, you haven't seen the kind of violence and extremism that you've seen in Canada. Way from 1980s and from 1984 onwards. We have never tried to understand this situation. This situation involved brown people killing each other. And the politicians, by and large, didn't give a damn. Trudeau definitely didn't give a damn. Trudeau is surrounded by the Khalistanis. He's considered a Khalistani. And that's not to say that he is, but, you know, you're known by your friends.
Ujjal Dosanjh, former Premier of British Columbia, we appreciate you joining us today, sir. Thank you.
It is obvious that the government of India made a fundamental error in thinking that they could engage in supporting criminal activity against Canadians here on Canadian soil, whether it be murders or extortion or other violent acts. It is absolutely unacceptable for any country, any democracy that upholds the rule of law. Canada fully accepts and respects the sovereignty and the territorial integrity of India. We expect India to do the same. In this case, they did not.
Balpreet Singh is legal counsel for the World Sikh Organization of Canada, and he joins me now. Mr. Singh, it's good to see you. Thanks for being here today.
Good to be with you.
When the RCMP held their news conference today, they said they were taking the extraordinary step of going public like this due to the significant threat to public safety in our country. How do you interpret those concerns from the RCMP Commissioner?
We've been living with this for the past 4 decades, Indian interference and targeting Sikhs in Canada. But over the past few months, we've seen a rise in violence targeting Sikh activists. So we've seen Sikh activists with their houses being shot up. We've seen extortion rings targeting Sikh businesses. And we knew where this was coming from. But to hear that from the RCMP and from the Prime Minister, that's meaningful. But I mean, the government of India being tied up with organized crime, that's a serious thing, and we've been the victims of it.
So these examples of violence targeting the members of the Sikh community didn't subside after the allegation the Prime Minister made in Parliament last year, didn't subside after the arrests and the Nijjar killing in May. You say they've only gotten worse and worse.
So in conversations with law enforcement, and as you can imagine, we've had a number of them, we were told that as opposed to being daunted by the Niger announcement, India was still actively pursuing its targets. And who are the targets? A lot of them are people born and raised in Canada, just like me, but they talk about Khalistan, which is a Sikh state, Sikh sovereignty, and they're organizing referendums on the question of Khalistan. And this is enough for the government of India to try and kill them, to silence them.
The move today to expel 6 diplomats that Canada says was involved, the Prime Minister's words on this were pretty unequivocal. There was no "we believe, we suspect." It was a statement of fact that the High Commissioner and the 5 other subordinate diplomats were playing a role in a growing criminal organization, as they call it. This is a disruption tactic. Does this make you feel any safer? Do you think this has gone far enough?
You know, since the Mullet killing, since the Niger assassination, we have said, the community has repeatedly said, that the trail will lead to the High Commission and to the consulates. These entities have vast networks of proxies who monitor Sikhs, who target Sikhs. So to cut the head off, which seems like what's happened here, at least in Canada, maybe it'll have an effect, but this is coming right from the top. This is coming from India directly. And like I said, their network of proxies is still very active here. So they've gotten rid of some diplomats, but will that solve the problem? I highly doubt it.
Network of proxies. Are we talking people in the community? Are you talking people with maybe political loyalties to the Modi government or just to the state of India? What are you talking about there when you talk about political proxies, sir?
There's a mixed bag here. So there are some people who have loyalty to the Modi government who are acting, but you have others who are basically people who want visas to India, who are being threatened, who are being coerced into saying, well, just do this one thing for us. Go to this event, take some pictures, give us some names, and you'll get your visa. So that problem's not going away. I mean, our community has ties to Punjab, has ties to India. Getting a visa to India is the main way India uses people against their own communities.
That sounds like a very difficult thing to police. I mean, bad behavior by diplomats, they can find evidence, they can investigate, they can do the allegation and then expel them from the country, as you saw today. But that sort of within the community tactic brought on by pressure is a difficult thing to deal with. So what else can the government, what else can the RCMP do at this point in your view?
First of all, we've seen this repeatedly. So whenever there's a Khalistan demonstration, even at Hardeep Singh Nijjar's funeral, there was an individual who was caught sending video and pictures to senior police officials in India. He was turned over to the police, and the police quickly took him to the side, and apparently he was released. So there's no repercussions here for engaging in that sort of foreign interference and targeting of Sikhs. Really, the law should be able to capture these sort of things. But on a bigger level, what we're seeing is that this isn't just affecting Sikhs in Canada. We're seeing Sikhs in the US, the UK, Australia, all being targeted by these criminal organizations with ties to the Indian government. Our Five Eyes networks, the G7, they all need to come together and say this is not acceptable. There needs to be a real reevaluation of our relationships with India. India is basically a rogue state, a hostile state that's engaging in extraterritorial killings. So this really needs to stop, and I think there needs to be a united response to it.
Well, we've had the expulsion from here and the expulsion from India. Stuart Wheeler, who is a charge d'affaires, and 5 others have been expelled from India. I mean, how do you, as a middle power like Canada, with significant cultural and economic ties to India, I'm in no way saying they shouldn't take action when a state is accused of an extraterritorial murder. How do you do it in a way that has meaning when the leverage is so lopsided here? Canada is not the United States or even the United Kingdom when it comes to their ability to squeeze a country like India.
What we've seen when it comes to Canada dealing with Russia or China has been a pretty strong and united front. Political parties understand that there needs to be a united front, and having interactions with diplomats from those countries is fraught with danger, and people are doing it very carefully. We haven't seen the same when it comes to India. For some reason, there's this notion that India is still the world's largest democracy. The fact is, India has tilted towards authoritarianism for a very long time. And even after the Niger announcement, we saw, I'll say it frankly, the Canadian Conservative Party, senior leadership, including the leader, attending events for the overseas BJP and sitting beside the Indian High Commissioner. That was hurtful to our community. We need to treat India just like we treat other hostile countries.
I've got about 30 seconds left before I lose the show. Are you worried about further escalation in the wake of this? Are you worried about retaliation against members of your community and your organization?
Look, we are not afraid of India. The Indians thought that killing members of our community would silence us on Khalistan about human rights issues. That hasn't happened. Khalistan advocacy is at a 40-year high, to be honest. But at the end of the day, this is on Canada. Canada needs to take a strong stand, and I think we need to once again reset our relationship with India. It can't be carte blanche. Right. There has to be a principle behind it, and killing Canadians is not acceptable.
Balpreet Singh, Legal Counsel for the World Sikh Organization of Canada. We're out of time, but I thank you for joining me today.